The lagoon lay as still as glass in the first pale light of dawn, each gentle ripple catching the sunrise in 1,000 trembling prisms of rose and gold. Brown pelicans floated upon the mirror-calm water like ancient vessels, their long bills dipped in silent vigil over the shoals of glimmering minnows that shimmered just below the surface. Solara drifted among them, each breath sending ripples across the kelp beds and stirring the bay's silver sheen. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, scanned the water for signs of food, but her heart stuttered when she noticed a single, desperate flicker of motion, far too sluggish for the darting school around it. Half submerged against a jagged rock, encrusted with barnacles and seaweed, lay a lone fish, its sides heaving in slow, pained gasps. A dark tear tore through its once lustrous scales, where the current had pressed it against the stone, and a fine ribbon of crimson trailed into the clear shallows. Around it, the minnows scattered in sudden panic, their silver bodies fleeing the wounded creature's silent plea. The lagoon's hush deepened, as if the very air were holding its breath. Solara's throat pouch fluttered, not with hunger, but with an urgent flutter of compassion that had no place in a predator's soul. She lifted her head, wings folding back as she regarded the struggling fish with ancient, unspoken empathy. Each pulse of its gill was a fragile thread of life unraveling in the chill morning water, and she could not turn away. The delicate balance of predator and prey seemed to tremble on a knife edge. And in that suspended moment, Solara felt the age-old call of mercy rise within her. Below the surface, the fish's flapping tail left furrows in the kelp's emerald dance. Above, Solara's broad silhouette darkened the water in a silent promise. With a slow, deliberating tilt of her head, she folded her wings into an arrow's shape and prepared to plunge. The world seemed to narrow. The distant cry of gulls hushed, the soft hiss of surf stilled, and the lone fish's trembling plea echoed in her mind. Then, in a single heartbeat of resolve, she launched herself skyward, muscles coiling and releasing in a seamless blur, and tipped forward into the sky. Below her, the lagoon awaited in breathless silence, a canvas of dawn-lit peril and possibility, as Solara became the living embodiment of mercy's daring leap. The instant Solara's powerful frame broke the surface, the lagoon erupted in a crystalline explosion of spray and ripple. Water cascaded across her tawny feathers, plastering them to her streamlined body as she angled her great bill downward into the trembling depths. The world beneath the ripples became a muted kaleidoscope of green-brown kelp and silvery minnows darting for cover. There, pinned against a barnacle-crusted rock by its own weakness, the wounded fish lay gasping, its tail fin flicking in slow, pitiful jerks. Solara wedged herself against the slick stone, her webbed feet scrabbling for purchase, as she locked eyes with the creature's cloudy gaze. Her throat pouch quivered as she lowered it into the water, hooding the fish's flank with gentle precision, careful to cradle without causing further harm. Around her, the lagoon's glassy calm had shattered. Gulls wheeled overhead in startled arcs, their shrill cries carried on the salty breeze. Solara stilled her paddle-like wings for a heartbeat, feeling the weight of the fish's life in the hollow of her pouch, the soft tremor of its body echoing through her bones. Lifting her head with a slow, triumphant heave, she propelled herself upward in an explosion of flipper and wingbeat. The water's surface boiled in her wake as she kicked against the submerged rocks, every sinew in her shoulders and back straining with the urgency of rescue. The fish's gills fluttered against the thin membrane of her pouch, and for a moment, its survival hung on her unwavering resolve. When she finally breached the waterline, sunlight struck the droplets clinging to her plumage like diamonds, and she cradled her precious charge against the golden dawn. Perched on a half-sunken log, Solara let the fish's head tilt free of the water, allowing it to gulp in new breaths of life. Its once dull scales began to gleam again as fresh currents washed over them, and its fins twitched with the spark of regained strength. Around the lagoon, the stunned silence gave way to the gentle whisper of returning waves, and Solara's deep, resonant call, a song of triumph and compassion, rolled across the water, sealing the bond between rescuer and rescued in the hush of morning light. The Serengeti air glowed with molten copper as the sun dipped toward the horizon, and the great wildebeest migration pressed onward in unbroken ranks. The calf, once a trembling wisp of life mired in mud, now trotted with growing confidence at its mother's flank, each hooffall a steady drumbeat of survival. The cheetah lingered at the edge of the herd's protective ring, amber eyes reflecting the warm light, coat still flecked with the faintest haze of dawn's struggle. Around her, the plain exhaled in golden waves. Termite mounds stood like silent sentinels. Acacia trees cast long, dancing shadows, and the tall grass rippled in a gentle breeze that carried both promise and the faint scent of rain. For a long moment, she watched the calf weave among its kin, noses raised in greeting, the low murmur of the herd, a comforting lullaby. The mother wildebeest lowered her head in solemn gratitude, pressing her muzzle against the spot where the calf's trembling flanks had once skidded helplessly. As the family reformed its ranks and the migration's steady march resumed, the cheetah felt the last tremor of urgency drain from her muscles. Every sinew that had powered the lightning chase now softened in the glow of dusk, and a profound stillness settled in her chest. Across the corridor of waving grass, a pair of jackals paused in their sunlit dalliance, ears twitching at the whisper of her departure, then melted back into the brush. Overhead, a lone vulture wheeled in graceful arcs, its shadow slipping across the plain like a benediction. The cheetah stepped forward, each silent pad sinking into the damp earth, leaving behind the echo of claws where once only mud had claimed the calf. With a final regal tilt of her head toward the receding herd, she turned her gaze to the open plains ahead. Her strides were fluid poetry, spine rippling, tail trailing like a brushstroke across the canvas of twilight. The grass closed behind her in gentle folds, hiding her slender form until she became one with the dusk. In the distance, the calf's bleat called once more in farewell, a tiny heartbeat that merged with the plain's vast rhythm. And as the last rays of the sun surrendered to evening's violet hush, the cheetah vanished into the great expanse, speed and mercy entwined in every silent step, leaving behind a story that would run on the wind and in the hoofprints of every calf, saved by her lightning-swift compassion. The moment Solara's paws found firm earth beyond the mud's greedy grasp, the calf collapsed against her flank, its slender legs trembling with exhaustion and relief. She crouched low, pressing her chest into the warm grass as the calf nuzzled its snout into her soft feathers, gulping in the scent of safety. Around them, the wildebeest herd froze in a living fortress, broad shoulders turned outward, hooves planted like sentinels against any lingering threat. The calf's mother, a towering matriarch with deep brown eyes, stepped forward, nostrils flared as she took in the strange, mud-smeared savior at her feet. With a gentle rumble in her throat, Solar extended a wing to brush away the last, clinging droplet of mire from the calf's flank, careful not to startle the newcomer. The mother drew her calf closer, pressing her own flank against Solara's lean side in a tentative gesture of thanks. The calf, still panting, raised its head to meet Solara's keen gaze, and for the briefest moment, predator and prey shared a silent vow. This small life would walk free under the Serengeti sun. The herd's low murmurs swelled into a chorus of acceptance as each wildebeest returned its attention to grazing, secure in the knowledge that the predator had chosen mercy over the hunt. Behind them, the hyena pack skulked at the edge of the clearing, their gaunt bodies half hidden in the tall grass. Their yellow eyes flickered with frustration as they realized the calf had slipped from their grasp. Solara lifted her head and let out a deep, resonant bark, less a threat than an assertion of her role as guardian. The alpha hyena snarled in response, hackles bristling, but when she advanced, Solara met her with unblinking calm, baring teeth still flecked with mud. In that charged standoff, the gravity of the cheetah's defense shone brighter than any speed. She stood unwavering, a solitary shield against the pack's hungry advance. Reluctantly, the hyenas backed away, slinking into the shadows as the power of Solara's presence held them at bay. Only when the tall grass swallowed their retreat did the calf's mother nudge her offspring forward, guiding it back to solid ground. Solara watched as calf and mother melted into the herd's ebb and flow, their silhouettes melting into the gold-lit grasses. The wind carried away the last echo of hooves and howls, leaving Solara alone beneath the vast expanse of sky. Her flanks heaved in quiet triumph, the ache of exertion giving way to a fierce, glowing pride. Even as hunger's pangs stirred in her belly, she had found something far richer to sustain her: the knowledge that mercy, swifter than any chase, could outrun death itself. The heat of midday lay heavy on the Serengeti grass, the sun beating down in merciless waves of gold and haze. The herd had reached a shallow watering hole fringed by tamarisk shrubs, and the calf, once trapped in mud, once cradled by the lightning-quick cheetah, learned the simplest lesson of life on the plains: how to drink. Its mother lowered her muzzle to the glassy surface, and with a gentle nudge, guided the calf's trembling snout into the cool water. At first, the calf dipped only its lips, drawing in a hesitant sip that sent ripples trembling outward. Then, encouraged by a soft grunt from the mother, it plunged its muzzle deeper, nostrils flaring as it gulped sweet water that shimmered like liquid silver beneath the blazing sky. Around them, the herd fanned out in a broad semicircle, each animal's head swinging between lush grass and water in a tranquil rhythm. Young calves gamboled at the edges, little wide-eyed copies of the one that had known terror by the lagoon, chasing each other in carefree loops before returning to their mother's flanks. The air was alive with the drone of insects, the distant cry of a secretary bird, and the rustle of breeze through waving grass, yet Solara remained on vigilant watch. She crouched at the fringe of the herd, muscles coiled beneath tawny fur, every sinew attuned to the herd's subtle shifts. A hushed flick of an ear here, a foot's hesitant slide there, each movement a whispered warning of lurking danger. The calf finished its turn at the water and lifted its head, droplets clinging to the down of its cheeks. It shook once, flanks quivering, then pressed close to the safety of the mother's side, ears flicking at every distant sound. Solara rumbled in satisfaction and padded forward, stepping between the herd and a line of shadowed acacia, where the hyenas had once returned to test their luck. When Solara's muzzle passed close, calf and mother both snuffled in gratitude, eyes bright with recognition that thanks could be conveyed without words. The calf raised its head, met Solara's gaze for a fleeting heartbeat, then dipped back to grazing, each cautious bite a reclamation of the life that had hung in the balance. As the herd prepared to move on, Solara lingered, drawn by the cool promise of the waterhole. She approached the edge, feathers gleaming in the sun, and lowered her head to lap at the same pool that had revived the calf. With each careful sip, the droplets trickled down her throat, easing the ache of exertion that still throbbed in her flanks. Around her, the world seemed to exhale in gentle relief. The grasses whispered, the breeze softened, and the heat of the day folded into something almost serene. When she rose, the herd's slow march had already begun anew, steady, patient, unbroken. The calf walked tall now, flanks buoyant with fresh strength, and its mother guided it along the well-worn trail toward greener pastures. Solara watched until the herd became a gleaming ribbon, moving through the grass, and raised her head in one last, low-slung bellow, a sound of farewell and benediction. Then, with the lightness of a creature born for speed, she melted into the waving grass, every silent step carrying her away from the family she had saved. In the hush of afternoon light, her silhouette faded into the golden plain, leaving behind nothing but the echo of a heartbeat that had outrun fear itself. Aurelia drifted above the mirror-flat surface of the lagoon as the first blush of dawn crept into the sky, each beat of her broad wings barely disturbing the glassy water below. The air was cool with night's retreat, carrying the tang of brine and the soft rustle of distant mangroves. Beneath her webbed feet lay a silver fleet of minnows, their scales flashing like scattered coins in the shallow kelp beds. Aurelia's keen eyes tracked the swirling shoals, seeking her morning's meal in the golden light. Suddenly, a lone shape broke the perfection of the shoal's choreography. A large fish, its sides marred by a deep gouge, drifted helplessly against the emerald fronds. Each flick of its tattered tail was a slow plea, bubbles of distress rising in soft plumes to the surface. The surrounding minnows scattered at its approach, leaving the wounded creature utterly alone in its agony. Aurelia's heart clenched at the sight. This was no routine catch, but a life clinging to the edge of extinction. With a graceful tilt of her head, she folded her wings and began her dive. The world slowed as she fell, wings tucked into a sleek V, beak aimed like a spear toward the desperate fish. The air whistled past her as she plummeted 50 feet, the stretch of sky above dissolving into the promise of water below. A heartbeat before impact, Aurelia extended her wings to buffer the plunge, and the lagoon exploded in a frothing crown of spray and foam. Beneath the tumult, Aurelia's powerful bill sliced into the cold water, and she pinned the wounded fish gently against the rocky bottom, careful not to inflict further harm. Her feathers fanned out in the turbulent currents, mud and seaweed plastering her sleek form. The fish's gills fluttered against the membrane of her throat pouch, and Aurelia felt its fragile life pressing against her in a tremor of hope. With a fluid arch of her neck, she cradled the fish in the warm cavern of her pouch and drove upward, wings beating with unrelenting power against the weight of rescue. When she breached the surface, water cascaded in shimmering rivulets from her plumage, and Aurelia rose high above the lagoon, every sinew quivering with the effort of carrying another's life to safety. Below, the once helpless fish writhed in renewed vigor, its scales glinting with the first spark of life returned. All around, the lagoon held its breath as the pelican, once hunter, now guardian, hovered in triumph, a living testament to courage's plunge and compassion's unbreakable grace. As the sun's golden arc rose higher, the lagoon shimmered beneath a sky streaked in apricot and pale blue, and Aurelia glided over the water one last time, beak dipping to steady the rescued fish within her pouch. Each measured beat of her wings stirred the tide in gentle eddies, and every droplet that fell from her feathers caught the light like falling stars. Below, the fish's once tattered fins now fanned with strength, its scales gleaming in renewed splendor as it peeked from the safety of her hollow throat. With a graceful tilt of her head, Aurelia banked toward a sheltered cove where a fringe of mangroves curved around shallow shallows, their roots weaving a cradle for wounded and weary creatures. The fish's soft pulses against her chest guided her descent, and she settled onto a smooth, sun-warmed sandbar where the water barely reached her ankles. Carefully, she lowered her pouch until the fish could slip free, and it tumbled onto the wet sand with a splashing gasp. It lay motionless for a heartbeat. Then, with a mighty flick of its tail, it propelled itself toward the deeper water, pausing only once to glance back as if in thanks before vanishing beneath the rippled surface. Aurelia watched the spot where it disappeared, heart swelling in the hush of the cove. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing like applause, and the gentle rustle of mangrove leaves whispered a benediction. She dipped her broad head in a silent bow to the rescued life, her great pouch settling like a soft drum against her breast. Around her, the lagoon returned to its tranquil rhythms. Schools of minnows reassembled in glittering shoals, kelp fronds swayed in the warming currents, and distant waves tapped a lullaby against the outer reef. Then, with a final stretch of her powerful neck and a triumphant rumble vibrating through her chest, Aurelia lifted from the sandbar and ascended into the sunlit air. Her wings carved graceful arcs across the sky, each beat carrying her toward the open sea and future dawns yet to come. Below, the lagoon gleamed in her wake, its surface forever changed by the courage of one pelican whose heart-stopping dive turned the tide between life and death, a testament to the boundless reach of compassion in the wild.